I'm Tamara, and today I'm going to walk you through everything that you need to know so you can make an easy reversible tree skirt. This project can be done in one evening. I know this because I did this project in one evening. And if you want to add some extra little embellishments like the pom-poms that I added to this one here, you definitely can, but it is optional. So I will walk you through the steps on how to either add the pom-poms, or if you want to do ruffles or lace along the edge. I will walk you through all of that when we get to that step. So let's jump into this tutorial and make a simple tree skirt in one evening.
You will need 1 1/4 yards worth of 2 different types of fabric as well as batting. Start by taking one of your 2 pieces of fabric and fold it in half so the selvage edges line up. Then you will measure from the selvage edge to that fold. Most fabrics come at around 42 inches from selvage to selvage, so your measurement should end up at around 21 inches. Then fold your fabric in half one more time, making sure that it's a little bit more than the 21 inches that you ended up measuring at. Smooth out your fabric and make sure that the folded edges line up nicely. Then double check that your measurements are the same from your folded corner out to the raw edges. Once you know what that measurement is, for myself it's 22 inches, then you can pin around the outer edge of your fabric so it doesn't move around too much, and then start marking all the way around. Take your ruler and measure from your folded corner out 22 inches and mark all the way around. Now, if you find you have too much selvage, you can always cut it back around 1/4 to 1/2 of an inch. So instead of marking 22 inches, you would mark at 21.5 or 21 3/4 inches. Then add some more pins along that marked edge. Now we're gonna move to that bottom folded corner, and we're gonna do the same thing, just measuring out 2 inches. Now, if you are making a tree skirt that's gonna go around a live tree, you may want to do this marking at 3 inches to give yourself a little bit more space in the center of your tree skirt. But for myself, my tree skirt is going around a fake tree, so the trunk is not that big, so 2 inches is perfectly fine. Once you're done marking both of these angles, then it's time to grab your fabric scissors and cut along the outer edge line. We're not going to cut that center circle just yet, just the outer edge. Then what we're going to do with this fabric is we will use it as a template for our second piece of fabric. So take your second piece of fabric, fold it the same way that we did the first. Then instead of having to do all of the measuring and marking, you can just lay this one right on top of the other one, pin it together, and cut around the edge using that top piece as your template. And now we can also cut that center circle out as well. Next, it's time for batting. So grab one of your pieces of fabric and open it up so you have a half circle. Lay it along the raw edge of your batting. For myself, my batting is stacked too high, and then use the fabric as your template, cut around the outer edge, around that inner center circle, and then trim along those straight edges if you need to, being very careful not to actually cut on your fabric. Then unstack those 2 half pieces of batting and lay them so that they create a circle. Then you will want to Franken batting stitch one of those edges shut. I will link to my Franken batting tutorial down in the description below if you want to see a closer look at how this is done. But essentially, I just did a wide and long zigzag stitch along that one edge, leaving the other edge open. Now grab one of your 2 pieces of fabric and lay it right side facing up on top of your batting. Then grab your second piece of fabric and lay it right sides facing down on top of that piece of fabric. Line up all 3 edges and then throw some pins throughout the center, securing all 3 pieces together. Now it's at this point, if you wanted to add a ruffle or some lace, that you would line it along the edge in between the 2 pieces of fabric and then pin across. For myself, I want to add my little pom-pom lace, which is actually easier to add at the very end. So I'll show you how I do that when I get to that point. And of course, if you don't want to add any other extra details, that's okay too. So what we're going to do now is find that open edge in our batting, and we're going to cut down the center so that the fabric also has an open edge. Now it's at this point that you should also sandwich your ties in between the 2 layers of fabric along along your straight edge. Pin in place so that when you sew your 1/4 inch seam, you will secure them in place. And now it's time to pin around the entire outer edge. For myself, I like to use clips to do this. And then along one of your straight edges, mark with 2 pins an opening between 4 to 5 inches wide, and you will start your seam at one of those pins, go all the way around, and then end your seam at the opposite pin. That way you leave an opening for yourself to turn this entire project right side out. But before turning right side out, grab your snips and just snip a few cuts in and around that center circle, as well as removing the 2 points on the top of those straight edges, as well as the 2 points on the bottom of the straight edges. Of course, making sure not to snip past your sewn seam. Then reach in between the 2 layers of fabric and turn your entire project right side out. I found that it helped by grabbing my chopstick to push out the corners and then just running it along the inner edge of the seam to help turn the entire project right side out and make it easier to press around all of those edges. And of course, when you're pressing around all of the edges, make sure that you fold in that opening, pressing the edges in and then pinning across that open edge. Now, as you can see, when I made my tree skirt, I actually forgot to add my tabs. So what I did was I laid them out where I wanted them. I grabbed my seam ripper. I seam ripped tiny little 1-inch sections into both straight edges so that I was able to tuck my ties in and sew across that edge to secure them in place. And now it's time to sew an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance around the entire outer edge. This will seal in that open hole that we used to turn the entire project right side out. And it's at this point that I added my lovely little pom-pom detail. So instead of doing the 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, I just went as close to the edge as I could so that I caught the back side of the pom-pom detail and secured it in place.
And that is how simple it is to make a tree skirt. I hope that you'll hit that subscribe button so you don't miss future tutorials. And as always, I hope you guys have a wonderful day. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.